just as butterflies do leave their chrysalis. I wanted to thank Leanne for that excellent editing job. That was very lovely, wasn't it? She got the important parts of that story. And as the video just reminded us, when we leave something and it doesn't go smoothly, and it very seldom does it? We ask ourselves, maybe I shouldn't have done this. And they say to their leaders, you know, we could have died under Pharaoh if that was the point. We could have died there with, pots of food right beside us. Instead, you brought us out here to starve to death in the desert. And this story is an amazing and central one in our faith story. How God helps the people escape from oppression. It's not as smooth as they want, and so they're saying to themselves, maybe I'd like to go back. And so the butterfly image is so helpful for us. You can't get back in. That chrysalis is useless now. You can't refold your wings and somehow wiggle back inside. I don't know if any of you know Leon the lobster. Leon, France here? Leon. L-E-O-N. Leon the lobster? No. Leon was for sale in a grocery store with elastic bands on, oh yes, now we know, elastic bands on his claws. And a guy named Brad bought him, and instead of plunging him live into boiling water, he put Leon in a saltwater tank and cut off the elastics. Well, Leon's moved a couple of times now. He lives in a 55-gallon saltwater tank and quite likes it. He shares the tank with some very frightened little tiny crabs and a few glass shrimp. Last month, Leon molted for the second time. And I had never seen that before. Now, you're from Nova Scotia. Maybe you're more familiar with it. But they filmed it. And Leon stopped interacting with Brad through the glass and was frightened even of the little tiny crabs and glass shrimp. And his eyes got cloudy because he was withdrawing. And even the surface of his eyes were going to be left behind as he left that old shell. And it's an amazing thing to see. First of all, the whole concept of a pet lobster kind of caught me off guard at first, but I'm onto it now. And he pulled himself out, and his new claws are bigger than the ones he left behind. It took a couple of days. One claw does this and one claw chews, right? And it took a while for them to get hard and useful, and he was very vulnerable. But when he came out of that shell, he was upside down and coming out with this soft new shell. He couldn't go back at all either. I would commend, if you have any interest in that kind of thing, Leon has quite a few followers. I'm one of them. I love that combination of images. It just came. Leon was a month late molting this year. It just came with this timing of our you can't go back. And how do we go forward? What do we want? What do we miss? What do we want to go back and get when we can no longer go back? And this is so true in so many places in nature, for so many times in our own lives, in our life as a community of faith, and even our life as a city, when we have to give up old things. And even though there might be toxic, in the giving up, we realize we're going through a process. I was told there was a time when Victoria aimed to be called more British than the British. That was an aim. Now, they have given that up. That's no longer part of their entity. But when you come in on a cruise ship, you get a sense that they're still trying to make that available for the tourist industry. So we've changed it. We couldn't go back, though, because it was toxic, just as living under the Pharaoh was toxic for the people of God. And so we have this combination of things happening over and over again. As we move on, we adjust. But the big point of that story is that there was manna, tasted like honey, wafers made with honey every morning. And at night, quail. So they had bread and they had meat for 40 years. The quail descended at night to be caught for their dinner. And in the morning, 6 days a week, fresh manna. The being that in spite of their whining at being rescued, Exodus, the freedom, God was still with them, providing for them. And that's what we hang on to for us, going through all the changes we're going through individually. I've been through that process called downsizing. Downsizers, how many of you here? It's something, isn't it, Sharon? It's quite something to go through. And sometimes it's great. You think, oh, I'm so glad that room looks so much better now. And sometimes you think, oh, I gave away my mom's sewing machine. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Back and forth, downsizing. In this process of amalgamating, I heard when I first got here the stories about Metropolitan and how that happened with the walk up the street. I heard about that. But what an evocative image for leaving behind. And so now we're in another process where we're talking about what we want to be, how we want to respond to the call of God in our time, 20-some years later. And what does that mean? We're willing to talk about leaving behind. The big remembrance for us is God is with us. God is with us as surely as the quail landed at night and the manna was there in the morning. God is with us. And what is the quail and manna for you? I was thinking about that after reading that story because it's one of the longer readings we have. I thought, like, for us, what is that food? Well, it is each other, I think. I felt that yesterday at Dr. Krause's funeral. It is the community. We are the manna to each other. We're the presence of God in each other's life. Our prayer team is like the quail, watching and remembering and being there constantly, day after day. So many different ways we can interpret that story to remember that we too are constantly accompanied by the Spirit of God. The quail and the manna for you might be something different. It might be the music. It might be coffee with people after church to visit and find out what's going on in their life. All these are different visual interpretations, but they're just interpretations. Underneath it all, the truth is we're not alone in the desert. We're not the first people to feel like we've been wandering either. And so we go back to this story and we see that you don't have to go back in, Leon. Your new shell is beautiful and shining. And the butterflies, once they get out of that, they can fly as they were meant to be. And so we don't have to go back, although there are moments when, like the people of the long ago ancestors in the faith, we would want to go back. I mean, we might want to go back to the days when our Sunday schools were full, right? When I was a kid, there was no room for the kids in the Sunday school. We had to go into our own church because the adults took up all the room. But you know those days are over. You know those days are over, even if we would want to go back. And so we're at this time, a threshold. You know, we talked about that, the liminal times between one and the other. And I find comfort, and I hope you do too, that this has been repeatedly the story of the people of God. That where you thought, this is where I'm going to live, I'm going to probably be here forever. And then 3 years later you think, oh yeah, I used to live there, I'm somewhere else now. Over and over again, our identity changes. There is a time in our life when you're somebody's kid. Who is that? Oh, that's the McKinnon girl. You know, and then it moves on to you're somebody's mom. You know, it goes, and it goes. We have these different identities. And the constant, just to say it one more time, is that you are not alone in all these changes. We're not alone as individuals. We're not alone as a community of faith. We're not alone as the GV, the Greater Victoria District, Greater Capital District, the Capital Regional District. In none of those places are we alone. Sorry. So that story, I ask you this week to look, to ask yourself, where was the manna that you were given this week? Total surprise. You woke up in the morning, and there it was, to nurture and feed you all through the day. For 2 generations, 40 years they had it. Every morning, new and wonderful. This is our story of faith. Thanks be to God.